Welcome back. What is the future of travel going to look like within India? And definitely, what is the future of traveling abroad going to look like? The question has come to the fore after the government announced in the last couple of days that students and sports people traveling for the Olympics this year will have the details of their COVID-19 vaccination linked to their passports. And this will ensure that they can travel smoothly. It's also become front and center because there have been reports that students who took Covaxin, 2 doses of Covaxin, and then went on to join university in the United States were asked to be vaccinated all over again, since Covaxin has not been recognized yet by the World Health Organization. On the other hand, you have some nations like Israel, a nation states in the European Union, who are now talking about putting out and giving vaccine passports for the easy movement of people within those regions. Essentially put, if you have 2 jabs done from an authorized vaccine which is recognized by the WHO, it should possibly be easier to travel. But is that fair? Now, recently at a G7 meeting, India had the position that that could be discriminatory, especially for developed nations which will vaccinate slower, or those nations which have large populations. That means if you have not yet managed to get your shot, you are stuck, you cannot travel, and that is not necessarily fair. So what is the way forward? Is it fair or unfair to have a vaccine passport? Should those who have had 2 jabs not be required to take a COVID-19 negative test while taking a flight, at least domestically? These are some of the issues that we are going to be discussing this evening. Madhavan Menon, Sankalp Agarwal and Subhash Goyal with me on the show. Welcome to all of you. Sankalp, let me start by getting your take on the entire debate over vaccine passports. Do you think they're a necessity and inevitable, or do you think they will end up cutting out opportunities for many?
So vaccine passports is not pretty much the new thing out there, right? If you see certain countries in Africa which are suffering from, old diseases like cholera, etc., still carry, vaccination proofs when they have to travel across the world, right? So it's not something new, but, COVID, what COVID brings forward to us is, at a global level, we need to have a digital mechanism so that, the tourism industry as a whole can revive. So that's the direction. So digitization has to happen, right? And that will enable, easier. Imagine an airport where, millions of people are going in and they just have to, take their smartphone or some passport or something else, and they can just, put the QR code and just move on, right? And then that's the easiest way in which international tourism will revive, right? And it is all connected. India reviving, and any other country reviving is all connected, right? So vaccine passports have to come in some form, and it's better that it is digital, because that's the future where the country is now. That's how I am thinking about it, and it will only help the tourists to become better from that. Now there are challenges, and each challenges will have to be solved in certain proportion, right? There's a standard 80-20 rule. So if you see international tourists from India also, right? So the top 8-10 metropolitan cities will constitute to nearly 60-70% of the tourism, right? So you can effectively switch on 60-70% of the tourism by focusing on a smaller set of people. And similarly, when you invite tourists to India as well, right? Then again, there are top 4-5 countries where the GDP movement is maximum, right? So instead of opening for all the 175 countries across the world, if you focus on these few countries where you can figure out the solutions to work with, so you have effectively solved for 60-70% of the whole GDP coming from foreign countries to India and Indian spending outside, right? So both can be solved, and then you can incrementally improve from 60%.
But foreign travel is not only about. Now, I get your point, Sankalp. But foreign travel is not only about tourists. And it's not only about those coming in from high GDP countries into India. It's also about Indians wanting to travel for work, for studies, for various factors. Madhavan Menon, how do you look at it? Will vaccine passports be an inevitability, and you will see perhaps a situation where the jet setters, where the elites, those with higher income groups, will be able to travel earlier, maybe by the end of this year, or maybe they already are, as opposed to those who haven't had the opportunity of getting 2 doses yet?
Good evening, Tamanna. Thanks for having me on your show. I think this is a fairly complex subject because there are multiple players. You've got governments at one level, you've got airlines at another level, you've got individual countries at a different level. Now, everybody is talking about a subject called passports, but none of them are talking about the same thing. So if you look at the airlines, you've got a couple of airlines backed by IATA who are talking about a passport. You've got countries, the European Union, that has already launched its own version of a passport. There are other countries who are talking about it, but have no clarity as to what they want to follow. So I think unless the uncertainty or everybody comes together and decides how it needs to be done, I think we're going to have some confusion. In the meantime, I think the basic tenet that is going to be applied is, are you vaccinated or not? And therefore, I believe that the government of India's announcement that they will link your vaccination status to your passport is at least a starting point. My belief is that travel, and I don't think it's got anything to do with whether you're a part of the elite or you're well-heeled or whatever. The reality is that anybody who's at least managed to get 2 vaccinations, which I assume if we look at a date of, say, let's say September, October this year, will be able to travel. Now, some destinations like Dubai and others, which are tourism hungry, will most probably be a little more lenient in how they apply the rules. Other countries which have very strict healthcare requirements will be a little more concerned. So my expectation is that Europe will be far tighter in terms of the regulations that they have. The US is still an open question. They're saying that they will open July 4th. They've not talked about any regulation so far. So we'll have to wait and see. I think this is an evolving situation. It'll be very difficult for us to sort of pin down on one action or the other. But I'm fairly confident that foreign travel in some form or the other will start post-September. Of course, I must tell you that India needs to get off this the red list in several countries before all this happens. And my expectation is that the Netherlands did something the other day, and things will slowly start coming back. And that's likely to take another quarter.
No, so India needs to get off the red list, number one. We need to vaccinate enough people. Covaxin needs to get approved by the World Health Organization. Otherwise, you have a huge chunk of Indians who will need to be vaccinated again or cannot travel at all. So all of those boxes need to be ticked. But going forward, because, unlike the problems with Ebola, and Sankalp earlier in the show was referring to Ebola, vaccinations which are required to travel to some countries, but that was fairly limited and the scope of it was fairly limited. COVID-19 has hit every country on the planet. Subhash Goyal, how do you see it moving forward? And is it going to be necessary to have this 2 vaccination system in place, call it a passport, call it a certification, just to give confidence for the sector to reboot?
I agree with Mr. Menon that it's a very complex situation. But having said that, we have to move forward. We have no other choice. And to move forward, there are 2 aspects to this issue. One is domestic travel, which is within India. That, like Israel or like the European Union, you can have your rules and you can have your, digital passes or, something like what Sankalp was talking about. Like for yellow fever, you can carry a WHO booklet. But the IATA has already started what is known as an IATA travel pass. And this pass has been approved by 50 airlines. And the pilot is being done with the Singapore Airlines. And British Airways has also approved this. And now they have made presentations to the Indian carriers. And we want Air India and the other carriers to, Indian carriers to approve it. Because whatever may happen, you see, all these local, the European pass, or if they have a Pan-African pass, or tomorrow they have a Middle East pass, all these passes will have to be integrated internationally. because for the Indian economy to start, it is very, very important. And our suggestion earlier, when I was with Faith, we had written to the Civil Aviation and the Health Ministry that at least those who have been vaccinated, who have received both the vaccinations, and if they are tested negative, they should be allowed to travel. That is something which can be done immediately. Earlier also, you see, we were accepting, under the air bubble agreement, we were accepting passengers from all over the world with which we have air bubble agreements, who have been, tested negative 72 hours before. And now with more than about 200 million people being vaccinated in India, and an equal number or even more being vaccinated all over Europe and US, which are the source markets for inbound tourism, I think it is very important that as soon as possible, the government should accept the IATA travel pass, because IATA is a organization which all the airlines recognize. And I was talking today to the head of IATA in India, and he said that WHO and ICAO have also approved the IATA travel pass, and they are in the process of, doing integration, technical details. And the pilot, Singapore Airline has already started. In India, all the major labs, Apollo hospitals and their labs have already, accepted the IATA travel pass, and an integration is going on as of right now. And similarly, you see, what is happening is that Lal laboratories and SRK and all these, big laboratories are going to be tied up with the IATA travel pass. So the only, internationally recognized proof or acceptable document will be the IATA travel pass. Now,
is the IATA travel
sooner,
pass? Yes, you made that point.
Yeah.
I'd like to keep it moving. Yes, I'd like to keep the discussion moving. I got that point about the IATA travel pass. There are many options that many, perhaps countries will look at. And that is the concern. That is the concern. Mr. Madhavan, let me come to you on that. There will be a different set of rules for different countries. How do we come together to a solution which is equitable for all? If you remember, at the end of the first wave, and maybe last year around this time, we heard that China was giving visas to people who were jabbed with the Chinese vaccine. And in fact, people had to travel to other places, get the Chinese vaccine. Some of them of Indian origin are still waiting for their visas. So if every country starts having its own stringent rules, we're going to see the chokehold over global travel continue for many, many more years. What is the kind of solutions we need to make sure that everyone can travel freely but safely?
So, Tamanna, let me just sort of draw your attention to something. I did an RT-PCR test a couple of days ago, and the next morning I received a digitized certificate of the RT-PCR test, the result of the RT-PCR test from the government. My suspicion is that we are one of the early players in digitizing even an RT-PCR test result. The vaccine certificate has already been digitized in India. So I think what has to happen is that if you're going to have a uniform vaccine passport, different governments have got to up their the way they deal with these documents and get them digitized. Because look, in the US, if you get vaccine, a vaccine, they give you what we call in Hindi a parchi. And you walk around with that parchi and you take a scan copy and show it wherever you go. Now, if you call that digitization, I don't know what is digitization. So I think that needs to be sorted out. Now, I would not, this is a medium-term issue, as both Mr. Goyal and I said, that this is a complex issue that needs to be sorted out over a period of time. My expectation is that in the interim, you will see vaccination being a requirement. It would have to be digitized. You'd have to, you can't just show a scanned copy, for example, knowing fully well that you don't know whether it's authentic or not. The RT-PCR test is here to stay for some time, in my opinion. I believe domestically that is likely to disappear over the next couple of days. But the reality is that the world has changed. And in order to travel, I think a vaccination has become the common denominator. And, the quicker we get our people vaccinated, the quicker they will be able to travel. Having said that, a major proportion of the 45 to 60-year-olds are already vaccinated. First jab, going into the second jab. So my expectation is that a lot of these people, that segment will actually be ready to travel in the October to December segment, if not January to March next year. So I'm not too worried about that. What worries me is that this whole talk of a vaccine passport, which vaccine is acceptable, which vaccine is not acceptable, could become a bit of an issue. And turn into, I don't want to use the word, but, there could be an element of discrimination that may emerge. That is a worry to me. Otherwise, I think this will play itself out, and
vaccine nationalism shouldn't be. Yeah. Vaccine nationalism shouldn't be the case. I'm right out of time, but I just want to point out that we've been talking only about how airlines will be allowing people to travel, or for visas, or will countries allow you to travel. But there is a whole other side in terms of hotels. Will it be easier to get bookings, or will the hotel industry feel it's safer to open up to people who've had both jabs? And will the RT-PCR test then eventually be replaced? All of that is going to unfold, so a space to watch over the next few weeks. I want to thank all of you for joining us on the show this evening. Before we leave on the India Development Debate, let me just take a couple of minutes to talk about an announcement made today by the founder of Book My Show. Earlier in the show, we talked about how retail companies in the digital space are the hottest thing and everyone's vying to buy them. Tata Digital has picked up a few and what their big plan is. But the pandemic also has its harsh side, and we're seeing that with Book My Show, which has let go of 200 people today. We don't know if there will be a time when events will be back in great force, but the casualties on the jobs front is beginning to be seen. With that, I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening on the India Development Debate. We'll be back with a brand new show tomorrow, same time, same place. Stay safe.